In Ezra chapter 7, we are finally introduced to the man himself, to Ezra, the one who is writing this account. And he starts by listing a bit of his genealogy. Now, this is not every single person in Ezra's family line, but these are some of the well-known people that Ezra is connected with. Ezra sees himself as part of this celebrated lineage, not just in terms of his biology, but also in terms of his authority. And he uses his authority in the best possible way to lead people lovingly to the living God. You see in verse 7 that he's not alone in coming back to Jerusalem, but he's bringing people with him. Priests, Levites, musicians, gatekeepers, temple servants. They also came up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. Now, why these people didn't come back in the first wave of obedient exiles is a mystery, but either way, it is encouraging to see that though only 50,000 returned in that first wave of obedience, in the intervening years, more and more people have been coming back to the land that was promised to their forefathers as an everlasting inheritance. You'll notice too that the journey that takes Ezra home is an extremely long one. They arrived in Jerusalem in the 5th month of the 7th year of the king. He had begun his journey from Babylon on the first day of the 1st month. Why so long? Well, yes, it was a significant journey, but perhaps because Ezra was traveling with so many people and so much material to help the rebuilding project. In fact, if you just look down to verse 15, you will see that the king writes a letter to go with Ezra, and he says, "You are to take with you the silver and gold that the king and advisors have freely given to the God of Israel, whose dwelling is in Jerusalem." So that explains why the journey takes so long. He is carrying an enormous amount of provisions. You get a glorious glimpse of Ezra's preparation in verse 10, where we read that Ezra had devoted himself to the study and observance of the law of God and to teaching its decrees and laws in Israel. I just want us to spend a moment thinking about the preparation of this man Ezra for the task to which he has been called. The study of the law, the observance of the law, and the teaching of the law. All three of those aspects are vital, and if you remove any one of them, it is like chopping off one of the legs of a three-legged stool. Suddenly there is no stability, there is no weight-bearing ability, suddenly the whole thing collapses. Think of this, if Ezra had been committed to studying and teaching the law, but not really observing it, he would be what? He'd be a hypocrite. Like the Pharisees in the New Testament era. They knew what to do, they told others what to do, but they themselves found, in fact created, all these loopholes in the law which showed actually that their hearts were hard, and they were interested much more in their own power and position than promoting the true glory of God. Studying and teaching the law is a disaster if you refuse to observe it yourself. Studying the law and observing the law, that is a very good thing, but Ezra lives in a time of enormous spiritual ignorance. These people don't know what God requires of them, and Ezra is called to teach. And so, in his case at least, it would not be a good thing for him to study the law and observe the law, but then stay silent about it. Likewise, we ought to do more than just those two. We are called to speak. Though we might not all be teachers, you should be able to say something, at least to some degree, in honor of God's glory. You should be able to say to your family member or your hairdresser or your next door neighbor, for example, "What did you do at the weekend?" And they should say, "I did a great deal of fascinating and important things. How about you?" And you should be able to say, "I went to church and I really enjoyed it. And I'd love if you would come along sometime." Perhaps some people could say a lot more than that, but you should be able to say at least that. "I love the Lord. My trust is in him. I freely choose to worship him. I'd love to invite you to do the same." Studying, observing, these are all good things, but there ought to be a declaring, a proclaiming part to your life as well. What about this final combination? Observing the law and teaching the law, but never actually studying the law. What does that two-legged stool lead to? Well, spiritual ignorance. If you are not studying, if you are not receiving truth from the source, from the Word of God itself, if that's not where your information is coming from, then instead you are simply plucking your best ideas out of your brain and trying to teach them as truth. Now, our living and our speaking must be anchored in the Word of God. And if it's not, that puts us in a very dangerous place indeed, doesn't it? And so what a glorious combination of characteristics found in this man, Ezra. He had devoted himself to the study and observance of the law of the Lord and to teaching its decrees and laws in Israel. We are not Ezra. Our circumstances are different. But may it be the case that we are likewise devoted to studying the Word of God and observing the Word of God and speaking in whatever sphere we are called to in a way that honours the Word of God, that by God's grace, those who are lost might be saved, and those who are already saved might be strengthened as together we seek to honour the living God.